A faint hum reverberated through the metallic walls of the small shuttle as it glided through the endless vacuum of space. The stars outside sparkled like scattered diamonds, indifferent to the lives and struggles unfolding within the ship. In the cockpit, Captain Lyra von Axon stared at the view ahead with a sense of determination. She had been on missions that had taken her to the darkest corners of the galaxy, facing alien creatures, hostile planets, and environments that tested even the most experienced of explorers. But today, something felt different. Something was off. The shuttle's control panel blinked with a sudden red light, a warning. Lyra tapped a few buttons, and the holographic interface projected a map of their destination, a seemingly benign rock floating in an isolated part of the asteroid belt. It had all the markings of a routine mission: survey a dead planet, check the atmosphere, analyze the terrain, and return to the fleet. Standard procedure. Except, it wasn't. She could feel it in her gut, the sense that this mission wasn't going to be as straightforward as she hoped. Beside her, Lieutenant Dax Oren, her trusted second-in-command, was running diagnostics on the ship's systems. Dax was the type of officer who thrived on order, structure, and predictability, qualities that often clashed with Lyra's more intuitive, spontaneous approach to command. But today, they had to work together. The crew they commanded was small, only 5 members, and they had to make sure everything went according to plan. "Captain, we've got a slight issue," Dax said, his voice uncharacteristically tense. "The communication systems are starting to malfunction. We're not getting a clear signal from the fleet." "Did you try recalibrating the receiver?" Lyra asked, her voice steady, though her pulse quickened. It wasn't unheard of for comms to get scrambled when navigating through certain sectors, but this was different. "I did," Dax replied. "But it's as if there's interference coming from the planet's core. It's almost like it's alive." Lyra's brow furrowed. "Alive? You think the planet's generating its own signal?" "It's not just the planet, Captain. It's something beneath it," Dax said, glancing up from his terminal. "We might be walking into something we're not prepared for." The shuttle descended further toward the planet's surface, an almost eerie silence falling over the crew. Lyra surveyed the crew, an eclectic mix of skilled professionals who had been thrown together by fate, bound by the shared thrill of exploration and the constant promise of discovery. Their personalities clashed often, but in moments like this, they came together like a well-oiled machine. Tessa, the biologist, was reading over her data pad, oblivious to the tension in the air. She was young, enthusiastic, and had an infectious passion for studying alien ecosystems. She often found wonder in things others deemed insignificant, like the moss-covered rocks on a barren moon or the unusual fungus growths on a dead asteroid. Her curiosity was relentless, even in the face of danger. Meanwhile, Karan, the engineer, was tinkering with the shuttle's power core in the back, muttering to himself in a low, steady tone. He was the kind of man who could fix anything. From broken systems to a shattered heart, nothing was beyond his capability. His quiet demeanor was often mistaken for indifference, but anyone who truly knew Karan understood that he was the backbone of their operation. Rounding out the team was Lyra, the ship's medic. She was the calm in the storm, always ready with a solution to any problem, whether it was a scraped knee or an alien infection. Today, she was sitting in the back, humming a low tune to herself, as if trying to calm her own nerves, or maybe the rest of the crew's. "Captain, I'm seeing some strange readings coming from below the surface," Tessa said suddenly, breaking the silence. She wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but when she spoke, people listened. Lyra leaned over and glanced at the display on Tessa's pad. The scan showed signs of unusual electromagnetic pulses emanating from deep within the planet, along with seismic activity that suggested something large and possibly active was buried under the planet's crust. Dax raised an eyebrow. "Whatever it is, it's not natural." Lyra chewed her lower lip, deep in thought. This wasn't what they had been briefed on. No one had mentioned any activity beneath the surface. But here they were, on the verge of discovering something unknown and potentially dangerous. And as much as she hated to admit it, there was a part of her that was excited. This was the thrill of space exploration, the promise of the unexpected. "Let's land and take a look," Lyra said, her voice firm. "We won't know anything until we get eyes on the ground." The shuttle touched down on the dusty surface with a soft jolt, the landing gear absorbing the impact. The planet's barren landscape stretched out before them, a desolate gray terrain with only the occasional boulder or crater to break up the monotony. It looked like a lifeless rock, unworthy of further exploration. But beneath that lifeless facade, something stirred. Lyra looked at her crew, their faces a mix of curiosity and wariness. They knew better than to make assumptions, but the tension was palpable. This wasn't going to be another routine mission. This wasn't just a survey. This was something more. Tessa was the first to speak up, breaking the silence. "I've never seen readings like this before. It's as if the planet's alive, or at least, something beneath the surface is." "That's why we're here," Lyra said with a half-smile, trying to lighten the mood. "We're explorers, remember? We look for the unknown and uncover its secrets." The door to the shuttle opened with a hiss, and the harsh sunlight of the planet's twin suns bathed the crew in a stark, unforgiving light. The planet's atmosphere was thin, but breathable, a rare find in a galaxy full of inhospitable worlds. As the crew stepped out onto the dusty surface, Lyra's boots crunched against the dry earth, and she took a deep breath, savoring the rare moment of calm before the storm. But as they began to move toward the coordinates that Tessa had pinpointed, something shifted in the air. The hum of the planet seemed to change, vibrating just beneath their feet, sending a chill down Lyra's spine. The feeling of being watched, of being drawn into something far bigger than themselves, settled into her bones. It was as though the planet itself was waiting for them to make the first move. Suddenly, Karan let out a low whistle. "This doesn't look right." Lyra glanced over at him, her heart skipping a beat. He was staring at a massive structure that had emerged from the dust, an ancient, crystalline spire rising out of the ground like a jagged tooth. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before, and the faint glow coming from its surface suggested that it was far from abandoned. "What is that?" Lyra whispered. Tessa, her eyes wide with excitement and a touch of fear, responded first. That shouldn't be here. There's nothing in the records about a structure like this." Lyra stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. The excitement that had been building in her chest now felt more like a weight pressing down on her. They were no longer dealing with a simple survey. They had stumbled upon something ancient, something that had been buried for reasons they couldn't yet understand. Whatever it was, they had found it. And there was no turning back now. The stillness of the planet was thick and suffocating, like a blanket wrapping around the crew, pressing them into silence. The ancient crystalline spire loomed in front of them, its jagged edges glimmering eerily under the twin suns. Lyra stood motionless for a moment, her thoughts racing. They hadn't come here looking for ancient ruins, but now that they'd found one, they couldn't just walk away. She could almost feel the weight of the planet's history pressing in on her, daring her to uncover its secrets. Yet there was something else in the air, something primal that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. "Well, this is unexpected," Dax said, his voice tight with apprehension. He was never one for surprises, especially not ones like this. "What do we do now?" Lyra turned to face her crew, their faces a mixture of curiosity and unease. Her mind churned with possibilities. They could leave, report the discovery to the fleet, and hope someone else would take the responsibility. But that didn't sit well with her. The chance to explore this alien structure, to uncover something truly unique, something that might change the course of history, was too tantalizing to pass up. "We move forward," Lyra said, her voice resolute. "Whatever this is, we need to learn more." Tessa stepped forward, eyes wide with excitement. "I've never seen anything like it. The structure, it's not just alien, it's not like any tech I've encountered. The readings I'm getting, it's as if it's still active, like it's humming with energy." "Alive," Karan muttered, more to himself than anyone else, his hand already drifting toward his utility belt, pulling out a small scanner. He was the one to sense danger, the one who always took extra precautions. "This feels wrong. We don't even know if it's safe to get close. Lyra glanced over at him. I understand, Karan, but we can't sit here forever. This could be the discovery of a lifetime. We need answers, and they're inside that spire. We'll take precautions, but we're going in. Lyra, ever the calming presence, spoke up. Let's just make sure we're careful. No one does anything reckless. The crew nodded, their expressions reflecting a mixture of determination and uncertainty. Lyra gave a quick glance around to make sure they were all in agreement, then motioned toward the spire. The ground beneath them trembled slightly as they walked toward the structure, a subtle vibration that sent a shiver down their spines. It wasn't a major earthquake, but it was enough to make them all pause, glancing at each other. Lyra moved closer to Lyra, and without a word, handed her a portable scanner. Lyra didn't need to check it, she trusted Lyra's medical judgment. It was an all-purpose scanner that could check for toxins in the air, radiation, and any biological threats. But what Lyra was really checking for, Lyra knew, was whether the structure posed a danger to their health. I'm not picking up any immediate threats, Captain, Lyra said quietly. But something's different. There's something in the air, like a residue. Residual energy? Lyra asked. Possibly, Lyra replied, but I can't be sure. It's almost like it's permeating the air around us. Lyra frowned. Keep monitoring the readings. We don't know what's inside, and we can't afford to take any chances. Tessa, who had already started running scans on the structure itself, looked back at Lyra. The material it's made of, it's like nothing I've ever seen. It's not metallic. It's almost organic in nature, yet crystalline. If this is some sort of ancient technology, I have no idea how it works. Dax walked up beside her, peering at her readings. Maybe it's something we don't need to understand right now. But I'm getting strange energy signatures all around us. I don't like this, Captain. I'm serious. We should leave. Lyra could see the fear in Dax's eyes, though he tried to hide it behind a mask of professionalism. His instincts were usually spot on, and if he was worried, it was worth listening to. But Lyra wasn't one to back down easily. We're already here, she said, giving Dax a hard look. We're not leaving until we've learned everything we can. I'll take full responsibility. Dax nodded but stayed close, his hand hovering near his sidearm, ready for whatever might come. The team followed her as she approached the base of the spire. The surface was smooth, but the closer they got, the more Lyra realized that the entire structure seemed to pulse with an almost rhythmic beat, like a heartbeat. Each pulse sent a tremor through the air, and she had to fight the instinct to turn and run. The spire itself loomed like a monument to an ancient civilization, something that had been abandoned or hidden away for reasons unknown. It was larger than she had initially thought, rising almost 200 feet from the ground. Its surface seemed to shimmer and change, as if it were alive, a living, breathing entity that had waited for centuries for them to arrive. As Lyra reached the base of the spire, a deep hum echoed from within. It wasn't coming from the outside, but from deep within the structure itself. The ground beneath their feet seemed to thrum in response, and a soft, greenish light began to emanate from the cracks in the crystal. Hold on, Tessa said, her voice full of wonder. I think it's... But before she could finish, the entire structure pulsed with a sudden, deafening energy. A wave of heat and light washed over them, and the ground shook violently beneath their feet. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as a massive, invisible force surged outward, knocking them all off their feet. Get down! Lyra yelled, instinctively covering her head. She could hear Karan's voice, shouting something unintelligible, and Tessa's frantic cries as the shockwave hit them with full force. The tremors grew stronger, almost violent, and a high-pitched shriek filled the air, resonating through the crystalline spire. The crew struggled to regain their footing, but the force was overwhelming. Lyra's heart raced in her chest as she tried to push herself up, her limbs heavy, her mind reeling from the sensory overload. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the shaking stopped. The shrieking sound faded, and an eerie silence filled the air. Lyra pushed herself to her feet, her legs trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. What the hell was that? Dax gasped, his hand gripping the side of the spire to steady himself. Tessa was breathing heavily, her wide eyes locked on the structure. I've never seen anything like it. I think it reacted to us. Whatever that pulse was, it came from inside. Karan quickly stood up, brushing the dust from his uniform. We need to get inside, now. Whatever that was, it's not a random event. Something's awakened. Lyra's heart pounded as she surveyed her crew, their faces tense, but no one was seriously injured. The danger they had feared had just materialized in the form of an unimaginable force. But despite the chaos, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something monumental. Move out, everyone. We're not turning back, Lyra commanded, her voice a mix of determination and unease. We're going inside. The air inside the spire was cooler, thicker with an almost tangible energy, as if the walls themselves were pulsing with some kind of sentient awareness. Every step the crew took seemed to reverberate with the faintest of tremors, a continuous hum that didn't fade, only intensified. It wasn't the kind of hum you'd expect from a machine. It was something older, something far more primal, as if the very heart of the structure was still alive, still waiting. Lyra's boots echoed loudly in the stillness as they moved deeper, cautiously, into the darkened interior. The light from the outside barely reached them now. They were deep in the structure, surrounded by walls made of a material that shifted in color and texture depending on the angle you looked at it. It almost seemed alive, like the structure was watching them, its crystalline surface reflecting their movements like mirrors. Lyra motioned for the crew to stop. She felt it before she heard it, a distant thrum deep in the spire's heart. The vibrations were increasing. Whatever had triggered the pulse outside, it was now reacting to their presence inside. Captain, Tessa whispered, her voice barely audible as she looked at her readings, I'm picking up something. There's a massive energy buildup somewhere deep inside this structure. Whatever it is, it's like nothing I've ever seen. Lyra's eyes narrowed, her thoughts racing. It's drawing power. Drawing something from somewhere, maybe even from the planet itself. This wasn't just a reaction, it was a warning. Dax, ever the skeptic, looked uneasy as he scanned the surroundings. That pulse earlier wasn't just a welcome mat. That was an alert, maybe even a defense mechanism. We've disturbed something ancient, and now it's waking up. Karan's voice cut through the tension. We've already disturbed it. No turning back now. Lyra didn't need to be told twice. As much as every instinct screamed at her to pull the crew out and run, the scientist in her, the explorer, the one who lived for this unknown, refused to leave until she uncovered the truth. She stepped forward, her hand instinctively reaching for her sidearm, more out of habit than out of expectation of immediate danger. Stay sharp, she ordered, turning back to her crew. We move cautiously, but we move forward. The deeper they went, the more pronounced the atmosphere became. The walls seemed to pulse in time with their steps, as if they were being drawn into the very heart of the spire. Each step they took felt like 1,000 eyes were upon them, judging their every move. As they rounded a corner, a massive chamber opened before them. The walls were covered in strange, intricate carvings, symbols that seemed to shift and change as if alive, just like the spire itself. In the center of the room stood an enormous, glowing crystalline structure, taller than any of them. It looked like an altar, or a throne, or perhaps a generator, it was difficult to say. Its surface shimmered with an otherworldly light, casting long, flickering shadows against the walls. The energy readings coming from it were off the charts. Is that what I think it is? Lyra's voice trembled as she took a step closer to the crystalline formation, her eyes wide with both awe and concern. Definitely not something from any catalog I've ever read, Tessa murmured, her eyes scanning the intricate latticework of energy surrounding the structure. This isn't just alien, it's ancient. Far older than anything we've encountered in the galaxy. Karan's eyes widened as he scanned the structure with his own tools. The energy coming off this thing it's like a living organism. It's pulsing, but it's also storing energy. I'm not sure it's safe to get too close. But Lyra wasn't listening. She stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the glowing centerpiece. A part of her felt drawn to it, like a moth to a flame. The rest of the crew followed her at a distance, hesitant, their eyes never leaving the energy field surrounding the structure. Lyra reached out, her fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the crystal. The moment her fingers made contact, the ground beneath them shook violently. The chamber vibrated, and the hum of the spire became a deafening roar, like 1,000 voices crying out in unison. Lyra stumbled back, her hand recoiling, as the entire room seemed to come alive. "What the hell was that?" Dax shouted, his voice tinged with panic. His hand flew to his sidearm, the safety disengaging with a metallic click. "Captain!" Karan shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar. "We need to get out of here, now." But it was already too late. A sudden, blinding light flooded the room, and in that instant, everything changed. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as she found herself standing in a different place, one that felt both familiar and alien at the same time. The walls around them had disappeared, replaced by a vast, infinite expanse of starlit space. They were no longer inside the spire. They were outside, suspended in the void. Strange, shimmering objects floated around them, alien artifacts, spheres, and structures made of the same organic crystal as the spire. In the distance, the planet they had just explored seemed tiny, a pale blue dot far below them. "What the hell is happening?" Lyra gasped, her voice shaky. Lyra could feel her heart racing, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. They had been transported, physically moved, from the inside of the spire to somewhere else entirely. The crew stood together in a tight group, trying to make sense of their new surroundings. "We're not on the planet anymore," Tessa said, voice trembling as she stared out into the expanse. "But how? How is this even possible?" A voice, ancient and distant, echoed through the void. It was neither male nor female, but something in between, something without a distinct form. It was the voice of the spire, or whatever intelligence lay within it. "You are the first," the voice intoned, sending a shiver down Lyra's spine. "The first to awaken the conduit. The first to trespass where no others have dared. You are here because you must be." The crew exchanged looks of confusion and fear, their breathing shallow as the voice continued. "Your kind is nothing but a blip in the history of the universe. But now, you stand at the precipice. You have entered a realm older than your species, older than your galaxy. And now, the test begins." The voice faded, and the stars around them seemed to close in, surrounding them like a great cosmic ocean. "We need to go back," Dax said urgently, his hand still gripping his sidearm as if it could protect them from whatever was happening. Lyra shook her head, her mind still reeling from the shock. "We can't just leave. The spire, it's not just a structure. It's a gateway. A bridge to something far greater than anything we've encountered. We can't let fear control us now." "But how do we get out?" Karan demanded. "We've been transported to another plane. We don't even know how this place works, let alone how to leave." Lyra stood tall, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "We're going to find out. We've come this far. We're not turning back now." A shift in the atmosphere suddenly grabbed her attention. A portal, shimmering with the same crystalline light as the spire, opened before them. The space around it twisted and distorted, pulling at the fabric of reality. It beckoned them forward. Lyra nodded, determination in her eyes. "Let's go. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." With a deep breath, she led the crew into the unknown. The shimmering portal loomed in front of them like a door to a distant, unknowable world. The crew stood in stunned silence, their eyes locked on the swirling, crystalline energy that rippled at the edges of the gateway. The entire atmosphere around them felt different now, charged, electric, as if the very fabric of reality had bent under the weight of their discovery. Lyra felt a twinge of something deep in her chest, an understanding, or perhaps a warning, that whatever lay beyond would change them forever. The voice they had heard before, the voice of the spire, hadn't returned, but its words still hung in the air, heavy with meaning. "You are the first to awaken the Conduit," it had said. "The first to trespass where no others have dared. And now, the test begins." The question burned in Lyra's mind. What test? She turned to face her crew, who looked just as uncertain as she felt. The fear in their eyes was unmistakable, but so was the curiosity. They had come this far, and no one aboard the shuttle had been the type to shy away from danger, especially not when there was the possibility of learning something that could change the universe. The stakes were higher now, more than they had ever been before. But the strange hum of the portal, the pulsing energy around them, beckoned them forward as if it were alive, waiting for them to make their move. "Whatever this test is," Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with resolve, "we face it together. This is what we signed up for: exploration, discovery, the unknown." Dax shifted uneasily. "I don't think I signed up for this, Captain. I signed up to explore planets, not whatever this is. Whatever that is." He gestured to the portal, his hand trembling slightly. Lyra could see his fear, but she could also see his respect for her, the trust he had placed in her over the years. "I know this isn't what we expected, Dax. But if we turn back now, we'll never know what could have been. We've come this far. We can't let it end like this." The silence was thick as the crew processed her words. It wasn't just the allure of discovery that kept them there, it was the unspoken bond that held them together, the shared belief that they were meant for something greater, something more than they could have imagined when they first took their posts on the shuttle. Tessa stepped forward, her eyes wide with wonder. "Do you feel that? The energy, it's pulling us in. I don't know what this is, but I think we're supposed to go through. It's like, it's calling to us." "I don't like it," Karan muttered, still scanning the environment, though it was clear he didn't expect to find any answers. "It feels like we're being herded. But maybe that's exactly why we should go. Whatever this is, it's something no one has ever seen before. It's too big to ignore." Lyra, usually the most cautious of the group, finally spoke up. "I've never been more terrified in my life, but I don't think we have a choice. We either walk through that portal, or we're stuck in this void forever, not knowing what we've left behind." Lyra took a deep breath, then gave the team a confident nod. "We face this head-on. We've survived so much to get here. Whatever happens next, we do it together." With a final glance at her crew, Lyra stepped forward, her boots clicking softly against the crystalline ground as she approached the portal. Her heart raced, the weight of the unknown pressing in around her, but she kept her pace steady. She knew this moment would define them. As she reached the portal's edge, the swirling energy seemed to respond, expanding, reaching out, as if welcoming her. She looked back at the crew, who followed behind her with a mix of determination and trepidation. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's see where this takes us." And with that, she stepped through. The world around them dissolved in a burst of light and sound. It was as if the very fabric of existence was unraveling and then rewoven in an instant. Lyra's senses overloaded, flashes of impossible landscapes, colors that didn't exist, and shapes that defied all logic filled her vision. She felt as though she were falling, though her body was perfectly still, suspended in a moment of pure, unfiltered sensation. Time stretched and warped, her mind unable to grasp what was happening. And then, just as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. Lyra opened her eyes and found herself standing on solid ground. The crew appeared around her, equally bewildered, looking around with wide eyes. But the world they stood in was unlike anything they had ever seen. They stood on a vast, floating platform, hovering in the middle of an enormous void. Stars and galaxies spiraled in every direction, like a cosmic sea of fire and ice. It was as if they had entered the very core of the universe, a place where the laws of physics and time no longer applied. The platform beneath them seemed to pulse with an energy that resonated through their very bones, as though it were alive, aware of their presence. In the distance, an immense structure loomed, so large it defied comprehension. It resembled the spire from the planet's surface, but on a far grander scale. It was not merely a structure, it was a living thing, a vast city or vessel that stretched out across the cosmos, its surface shimmering with energy, its purpose unclear. Lyra took a step forward, her mind trying to make sense of what she was seeing. This is where it all comes together. This is what the spire was leading us to. Tessa's voice trembled with awe. It's a temple. A beacon. A way station. Whatever it is, it's ancient, beyond anything we could have imagined. Dax swallowed hard, his eyes scanning the horizon. And we've just walked right into it. We don't even know if we're safe. But Lyra could feel it now, an undeniable presence, a force that wasn't hostile but vast, ancient, and wise. It wasn't here to harm them. They weren't intruders. They had been chosen. The voice returned, echoing through the vast expanse. You have passed the test. You are the first to stand at the edge of understanding. Welcome to the Conduit. Lyra stood still, her heart pounding. The Conduit. The gateway to all things, the voice continued, the bridge between worlds, between galaxies, between dimensions. You have entered the heart of creation. Here, you will learn what no other species has ever known. You will carry the knowledge of the universe itself. Tessa's eyes widened. You mean, this is the beginning of something bigger? This is why we were chosen? The voice replied, its tone gentle but filled with the weight of eons. Yes. You are not just explorers. You are the keepers of the knowledge, the stewards of what lies beyond the known. Your journey is only just beginning. Lyra felt a profound sense of peace wash over her, mixed with an overwhelming sense of responsibility. She had stepped into something far greater than herself, greater than anything her crew had ever imagined. They had come looking for answers. They had come seeking discovery. But what they had found was far beyond their wildest expectations. They had found the key to the universe itself. And with that understanding came the realization that they were no longer just passengers in the great void. They were its stewards, its explorers, its pioneers. Together, they would carry the torch of knowledge into the unknown, and they would never stop seeking, never stop learning, no matter where it took them. And perhaps, just perhaps, they would change the fate of all worlds, in ways they could never have dreamed. As the conduit pulsed around them, Lyra turned to her crew, a smile tugging at her lips. We've only just begun. And with that, they stepped forward, into the infinite, together.